to your feet. I'm pulling up something real quick. This morning I woke up with a song. Did you guys remember that song? I think it's by Jeremy Camp, maybe not. It says, well, I went to the enemy's camp and I took back what he stole from me. Took back what he stole from me. Took back what he stole from me. Man, let me just tell you, this week we had a really good week. We were very blessed to be able to go to Florida with some friends, and I've never taken a trip like this, and I honestly felt super guilty even going. I almost didn't go like 4 times, and Andrew's like, you should go, do something nice, you know? But man, I got back, and I just felt like all this joy and all this peace that I felt like I had received from the Lord, like the enemy stole it from me. And like, to be honest, like I felt robbed when I came home. And talking to a couple people this morning, it's not just me. The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. It's who he is. It's what he does. And let me tell you, that song's been stuck in my head. I need to take it back. I demand it back. I'm not going to let him get away with it. So I don't know what it is that you feel. Maybe the enemy has taken your joy, your peace, your health, whatever it is that you are in need of, that you're like, where did it go? I just had it. Like, I don't even understand how I had it and now I don't. That's because the enemy took it from you. And the word, and it continues to say, it's under our feet. He's under our feet. And the word of the Lord, I think it's Hebrews chapter something, verse 20, it says, the God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. It just amazes me that God is God, you know, like he's big, he's able, he's mighty. It says, the God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. It's not under his own feet. He's going to use your feet to crush the devil. And I was just like, ooh, like, really? Like, you're that good that you're going to use me to do it? And so whatever that looks like today, I just want to challenge you and encourage you to take back what the enemy has stolen. And today, let's just lift up Christ. Let's just lift up Jesus. And any chance you get to just get a little stomping, you know, just picture the enemy's head under your feet, because that's where he belongs. That's what the word says. So God, I just ask right now, God, that you would encourage us, God. That you would empower us, Holy Spirit, to have the boldness, to have the guts, God, to fight and not just be taken advantage of, Father God. God, let us find our fight today. There's people here struggling, or maybe you're watching from home, you're struggling with depression, maybe you're struggling with anxiety, maybe you're just struggling in different ways, and I just pray, God, that today that we would find our fight, God, that we would know whose we are, that we would know who we are in you, Jesus. Be glorified in our praises, be lifted high in this place, God. God, I pray that a praise and a worship would arise and erupt from this place, from every heart, young and old, God. Be lifted high in this place. And all God's children said, amen. Okay, I'm losing my voice, so y'all gonna have to sing a little louder today, all right?
Tribes and tongues.
like shooting stars, burning up the night till heaven's open and we arrive in your presence, Lord, in your presence. Sing that again. Only a moment. Only a moment to live this life like shooting stars, burning up the night, burning us tonight. Oh, heaven's open, oh, till we arrive in your presence, Lord, in your presence. Let our voices rise, all creation cries. There's nothing better, no, there's nothing better than this right now. There's nothing better, there's no one better than you. There's nothing better, no, there's nothing better than this right now. One more time. There's nothing better. There's nothing better, no, there's nothing better than this, right? There's nothing better. There's no place we'd rather be than right here, right now in your presence. We wanna be where you are. Where you are is where I wanna be. When I lay my head down. In the evening when I close my eyes, you're still the only one I wanna cling to. You're the last thing on my
Oh, you guys, do you feel the presence of God in this place? Did you? I felt the heavens crack and the presence of God come down when Victoria was singing that middle Alleluia all the way to the sky. And it's like spiritually, it's something cracked in this place. And the kingdom of heaven is here today, you guys. This week, I read this, and I'm going to read this prayer over us. This is our pastor posted this. It's a memory from like 9 years ago when he was a little tiny baby boy. But this prayer is so powerful, and it spoke to where I'm at, and I think it speaks to where we all at. And this is the prayer he prayed. Kingdom of God, please come and invade my everyday, that I may move and live by the laws of your kingdom, the one I belong to. May I see the impossible be done before my eyes. May I never hold you or myself to the restrictions that this world's natural laws say I have to follow. But may I see those boundaries be pushed over on a daily basis, and you move through me and around me. God, I want to be left in awe by your power, and people need to see you move to believe in you, just as your disciples did. Flex your muscles and show me and the people around me just how real and mighty you really are. Let your kingdom come. Let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And you know what? That's our prayer today, right? We are not citizens of this world. We are citizens of the kingdom of heaven, and there are upside down rules. In the kingdom of heaven, it says that with man things are impossible, but with God all things are possible. And sometimes we don't have because we don't ask. What impossible things do you need today? I'm telling you, I will testify that I have prayed an impossible prayer this week, and God answered it. And so, what do you need? Do you need impossible prayers in your relationships? Do you need impossible prayers for your kids? Do you need impossible prayers for your health, or your heart, or your attitude, or your job, or your marriage, or whatever it is, Lord? He's got everything you need today. Come forward, and pray those impossible prayers, because we've got a God who answers.
the part where we just get to glorify who God is. We just get to exalt him, and we get to remind our minds, remind our hearts that he is able, that he is great, that there is nothing impossible for him, that there is nothing too broken, too far gone, that he cannot reuse, repurpose, or recycle. That is not who he is. Oh. Sing along. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. God good? He's so good. Take your seats.
Good morning, West Des Moines Open Bible. How are we doing today? I'm going to make you do it again because that was like half y'all were sleeping. I said, good morning, West Des Moines Open Bible. How are we doing this morning? There we go. That sounds like my church right there. Man, it's getting nice out there a little bit, ain't it? Man, God is so good. God is so good. Hey, well, if nobody's told you yet, which I hope somebody has, welcome to West Des Moines Open Bible. We are so excited for church this morning. We are in our series, Teach Us How, and I'm excited for Pastor Andrew to continue in that. But before we get into that, I have a couple things I want to say. Number one, if it is your first time here, underneath your chair there is a Connect card. I ask that you fill that out, turn it in at the Resource Center just beyond these two doors. There's a big sign that says Resource and Center. There's a gift waiting for you there. We just want to learn a little bit more about you. So fill out that card and turn it at the Resource Center. That would be much appreciated. And if it is your first time here, an extra special welcome. Here at West Des Moines Bible, our purpose is to love God and people well. Isn't that right? Man, and so that's our entire goal of the church. And so one thing that we believe here is no matter where you're at on your spiritual journey, no matter if you believe the same things I believe or if you believe something completely different, I want to let you know that you belong here. You are welcome here. You are safe here. You are celebrated here. And every single week that you show up, man, I'm excited that you showed up. Out of all the different places that you could do church this morning, you chose to come do it with us. And we are extremely grateful for that. So with that being said, I got a couple announcements. Number one, we are doing a co-ed softball team this summer. Man, do we have anybody interested in softball this summer? Yeah, come on. If you would like to sign up for co-ed softball, please sign up in the Church Center app. There's going to be a sign that looks like this in there. If you're like, no, what's the Church Center app? Well, that is a great plug. Hey, you go into the App Store or Google Play Store, you type Church Center, and then you download it. And then it's going to say, what church do you attend? You type WDM Open Bible. It'll pop up. It might even pop up already because you're so close to the geographical area. And so, what was that? Oh, I thought I heard something. Anyways, sign up for the Church Center app, and then in there's a softball sign-ups. The only cost for it is $15, and that is just to pay for a T-shirt so we look super cool out there when we're crushing all the competition. Is that right? Yeah, because we're not losing. We're winning. Number two is table groups. I want to encourage you this morning to join a table group. Then again, in the Church Center app is a list and calendar of all the events going on at the church, and there is tons of table groups going on every week of the month. This is, if you're like, no, what's a table group? Table groups are our community groups. This is where we get together. It's not a Bible study, so don't show up expecting a Bible study. It's just a time to break bread together and to have fun. That's the only requirement is you bring some food to share or some soda to share or something. I don't know what kind of drinks you guys like. But you bring it to share. You have a good time. You conversate, maybe play some games. So get plugged into a table group. It's going to be the quickest way for you to feel a part of this community is through those groups. Me and my wife, Julia, host one if you're looking for a really cool one. And then, oh, I love it. That's the first Saturday of the month, right, TJ? First Saturday of every month. So that's this week. Man, so make sure you go out to Sober Soldiers. I can let them have the best one, I guess. You could go to as many table groups as you want, man. You could go to every single table group, and then you will get a gold star. And so, provided by Andrew. You have to ask him for it. So do that. Hey, hand-drawn gold star. Wow, that's cool. This just got sentimental. That was the fun announcements. I do have a not-so-fun announcement, and you're like, no, you're the fun guy. Hey, this one is really more of an ask, and we are revamping our children's ministry. So if you have kids down there, when you check in and out your kids, we are now requiring that you check them in, number one, so please check them in. When you check them in, they'll print out tags for one for a kid and then one for the parent. We are asking that you please. We're not actually asking. We're requiring that you keep that ticket to get your kid back at the end of the service. And if you're like, hey, no, I don't want to get my kid back into the service, too bad, because we don't want to keep your kid either. But please, 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 just as we're trying to get safety and security as the church is growing, we want to make sure that we're a church that prides ourselves in that. So check in. And then the last thing is don't go past any of the doors down there. So there's doors that are blacked out that say, hey, don't go in this door. Please don't go in that door. And then there's a half wall built. Spent a lot of time building that wall, me and Andrew did. We worked really hard on it. Please don't go beyond that half wall. And there's a big sign on it that says, don't go past this half wall. And that's just to keep all your kids safe. And we have some kids that are escape artists, that if you crack that door an inch, they're already gone outside running down the road. And so please, please, please follow our check-in procedures. If you're like, hey, Noah, I can't remember everything you just said, they have a printout downstairs with it all listed out for you. Nice. And it went out in the email this week, so check your church's email. And then the last thing I have is we are going to do our first baptisms outside this year on May 29th. And so if you're like, hey, I want to get baptized in Raccoon River, sign up in the Church Center app. I am so excited for baptism. It's like my favorite Sunday every time. And so if you're like, hey, I want to get baptized, or I know somebody that would like to get baptized, sign up in the Church Center app. And you get a really cool shirt that says, I decided. And it's awesome. So sign up to get baptized. We're doing it outside, weather permitting. Weather permitting. There we go. And that is going to be May 29th. With that being said, I'm going to pass it over to you, Pastor Andrew.
I have a couple prayer requests for you guys today. We need to pray for Noah. He's hearing voices. And also thinks we're going to win softball. But I just don't want his hopes to be crushed. But speaking of winning things, today we're going to start off by playing a little game together, okay? You've probably played this before. It's called Simon Says. All right, so I'm going to give out some simple commands. If I say Simon Says before that command, you do it. If you don't hear Simon Says, you don't do it. If you miss a command, you're out. So then you'll just sit down or whatever. So let's get started. Stand up. Oh, everybody who just did, automatically, yeah. Wow. Whew. You guys are great listeners, though. I'm very proud. Okay, Simon Says, stand up. If you already stood, you're staying seated, okay? Simon Says, pat your head. Simon Says, pat your belly. Now stop patting. Anybody stop? You guys sit down. All right. Stop patting. Try. Okay, rub your belly. Who's out? I hear people. Okay, Simon Says, stop. Simon Says, high five your neighbor. Here, well, there you go, okay. Simon Says, put your arms out wide. Simon Says, reach your hands as high as you can. Now put your arms down. Okay, guys, sit down. Simon Says, sit down. All right. Right, games are not just for youth, right? We can do games too. Yeah, there's a lot of people with their hands up still. You guys are just going to be tired. Simon Says you're tired. And isn't it great how easy that game is? Right? The rules are really simple. It's easy to follow for the most part. Sometimes they try and get a little tricky. Simon Says, and you do it, right? That's the game. You know what's crazy to me is that when it comes to real life, Jesus says, and we don't do it, right? Man, right? What's even funnier, though, is that we study more about what he says, then we just go and do it. It's like, Simon Says, pat your head. And we're like, instead of doing that, we should start a small group where we discuss the deeper meanings of why Simon would tell us to do such a thing. Why would he want us to do that? What did Simon really mean in the original Simonian language? We do things like that, right? And it's just something that's funny to me. I was thinking about this week, and I was my wife was on a trip with her friends, and so I had all the kids at home, and they have chores they're supposed to do. One of those things was to clean their room, and I was working on my sermon, and I was like, hey, Emeka, go clean your room. And she did, and I was like, that's really nice of you, But I was thinking, what if she came back a half an hour later, and she's like, I memorized it. I'm like, what'd you memorize? Well, I memorized what you asked me to do. I know it in my heart now. And she's like, actually, I started memorizing it last week when you told me to do it. And I'm like, cool, but is the room clean, but then she continues, wait, hold on though. I have a group of friends coming over later so we can discuss the meaning of cleaning the room and like what it would look like if I actually did these things. Maybe it would change my life if I applied it, but I don't know until I discuss, with some people. But it's funny, like we know that in general, if somebody asks you to do something, you should do it. Like, in all other aspects of your life, imagine your boss at work, like, hey man, you need to go do this. And you're like, I'll get back to you on that. I really, study it a little deeper. Maybe Google it, open up my, blueletterbible.com and see what the Bible says about that. You just do it. When you show up before God, do you think he's going to be concerned more about what you know or what we've done? And I would challenge you to the point of, does it even matter if you know something if you aren't applying it? Right? We're in our current series, Teach Us How, and today's actually the last day of this series. We've been going through these simple things of Christianity and looking at how we should actually do these things. And first off, has this been helpful for you? It's been a good reminder even for me as I've been digging through these things. And I really hope that you have not just learned in your mind some good things from this, but you're actually applying them, putting them to practice, doing as Jesus says. And today we're looking at discipleship, or the process of making disciples. We're going to start in Matthew 28, 18 through 20. Noah used this verse last week too, and it says, Jesus came and told his disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Jesus says, go and make disciples, and then teach them what you know. Anyways, let's pray, because you guys get it, right? We're going to go and do, we could pray, but that's kind of what Jesus took it at, It was, I've said, go and make disciples and teach them what you know. And then he moved on. And today we're going to go a little bit deeper for you guys and what it looks practically today. But when you walk out of here, I expect that kind of attitude of Jesus said, and I'm going to go do. Right? And so maybe you've been in church for a while and you've heard, I've heard all about discipleship and making disciples, and it sounds a little complicated to me. I want you to just take that idea out of your minds and put it aside. I do believe that the church has overcomplicated discipleship in a lot of ways. And in trying to be helpful, we make a lot of steps and programs. And if you use this discipleship book and this thing, and you meet together at a certain time every week, all these things, it just sounds like, oh, that's a lot. I don't know if I can do that. But when Jesus commanded people to do these things, that was all there was to it. He knew that they could do it, that they had the ability right then and there to begin to disciple people and make disciples. And he feels that way about you guys today, too. You are 100% able to go and make disciples and teach them what you know. And so we're going to look at the life of Jesus, because that's how the disciples learned about this. They just followed Jesus around and were discipled, and so they can make disciples. And first off, it's hard to make disciples without disciples. So how did Jesus find his disciples? This has a lot to do, some crossover here with Noah's message from last week, so I'm going to kind of abbreviate some things. If you want to know a little more, you can go back to listen to Noah's message. He did a great job, didn't he? Yeah. Made me a little nervous to get up here this week. I'm like, I'm going to be fired. They're going to hire that guy. But he ruined that by hearing voices. So, but the first two disciples that Jesus gathered to follow him because of his reputation, they were actually disciples of John the Baptist, who John the Baptist was like, hey, I think that guy's like the Messiah. And they're like, so, should we go follow him? And he's like, yeah, that makes sense to me. And so they're like, hey, Jesus, where are you going? Where are you staying? And he's like, I'm just hanging out at this house. It's literally, they're like, where are you going? And he's like, I'm just going home. And they're like, can we come? And he's like, sure, let's hang out. And he made disciples right then and there. Another guy from that group was like, whoa, this guy might be the real deal. And he left to go tell his brother. And this was Andrew and Simon Peter we talked about last week, who later ran into Jesus while fishing. And they were having a bad fishing day. I don't really know if there's such a thing, right, as a bad fishing day. Maybe a day you don't catch a lot, but at least it's a day on the lake. And right? But Jesus told them, cast your nets back in, go over there. And they're like, whatever, crazy guy on the shore. And they did, but it filled up with fish. And then Peter was just like, I'm just going to follow this guy. He's crazy. And hopped out, and Jesus said, you should follow me. Let's become fishers of men together. And so they did. And two of their coworkers who watched it all happen were like, yeah, that seems cool. We want to go be a part of that. Later, Jesus ran into a mutual friend of Andrew and Peter named Philip. And Philip became a disciple. Then he went and he told his friend Nathanael. But he really went to Nathanael. He was like, I think we've met the Messiah. And he was like, I don't know if that's true. But Nathanael came with him. And when he showed up there, Jesus had a word of knowledge about Nathanael and his life beforehand and who he was. And Nathanael was like, oh, you're right. He is the real deal. And just like, I'm going to follow Jesus too. Right? And I know you might be thinking, well, I don't do that stuff. I'm not Jesus. And they followed him because he was the Messiah. And maybe Jesus had it a little bit easier in some ways there. But remember, we're supposed to be living a life like Jesus. Our lives should be different. People should see the freedom that we live in, the joy that we have, the love that we spread, and they want to come be a part of whatever you're doing because of that, right? Whether it's like, hey, what are you doing after work? Can we just hang out because there's something different about you, right? We should be growing in wisdom and favor with God and man, and that will draw people to us. But we also need to be ready to say, hey, come hang out with me. Invite people into your life and say, yeah, come follow me. That's all right. Let's go do this thing too. Our reputation should precede us. That was nice. We should be seen as a safe place in the darkness, a light on the hill, as Jesus said in Matthew. And as we talked about last week, we should be witnesses of Jesus' love to others. The Bible shares another story of Jesus gathering a disciple, and this was Levi, or also known as Matthew, and he was a tax collector. And we've talked about tax collectors here before, but a quick reminder that they were considered scum, like just bad people. They stole money. They were really wealthy because of that, but it was unfair wealth, so everybody was just upset with them. They lived basically in their own class of society because they were wealthy, but did it wrong, so they were kind of, bad, wealthy, but they didn't like hanging out with the other poor, bad people, so they had their own kind of class. And other people saw Jesus with Levi, this tax collector, and they were confused on why he was hanging out with this scum. They're like, why are you doing those type of things? And but Jesus was like, hey, this guy's going to be one of my disciples, and brings them in to follow him in the same ways. And discipleship is not just in church, right? It happens outside, and most of it should happen outside of this building and not Sundays or Wednesdays or things like that. And, first off, don't be afraid to talk to people at the workplace, right? It doesn't mean you got to be pushing Jesus on them, but when you hear them say, man, I'm having a rough day, then, take a moment and talk to them about it, right? And, Jesus wasn't afraid to walk into someone to a different social status in a different place in life and talk to them. He wasn't afraid to call him, to follow him. So, on that same note, don't be afraid to go to places where you wouldn't normally go. Right? It maybe will mess up your reputation. Maybe someone will be like, well, he's hanging out over there. I don't know what he's up to anymore. But to be where the people are who need Jesus is like the calling of discipleship. Maybe you're invited over to a new friend's house or a coworker's house or, to some gathering that's not really like your normal scene, not your normal thing. You should go. Right? If it's going to be a place of a temptation for you, don't go, okay? I'm going to throw that out there. Don't use it. Well, my pastor told me to go here. That's not what I'm saying, all right? And now you let you throw me under that bus. But take advantage of those moments where they're inviting you into their lives. Man, they want to be discipled. They want to have that relationship at that point. In all these cases, Jesus asked them to come follow me. Just this simple question. Sometimes you just need to ask to be involved in their life. Invite them into yours. But also, if you're never showing up in their lives, don't expect them to pick up the invite to join in your life. Right? If they've been inviting you to things and you don't go, and they're like, man, these guys never come to church with me. They've never come to these Bible studies. Like, how many things have you bailed on for them that they've been asking you to? Like, you don't put any value into their lives. Why would they want to put value back into yours? So in Luke 6, it shows that Jesus picked only 12 of all these people to follow him to like disciple. It says in other places he had lots of people he ministered to and disciples, as in people that were following him, but he was just, these 12 were his main disciples. And just understand, you can't disciple everyone, right? That's the importance of everyone should be doing this. This is why Jesus said everyone needs to make disciples, because we can't do it all on our own. Right? And if Jesus can only disciple 12 and one of them turned against him, I don't think I could even handle 12 people, you know? So don't overwhelm yourself, right? But don't miss out on this important command of discipling. Don't let it be like, well, I don't know if I can do it and things, and I don't want to overwhelm me. Like, you can do one. Start there. Also, guys, it's not my job to disciple all of you. That's impossible, right? And sure, yeah, Jesus can do the impossible. Well, you know, then ask him to disciple you, okay? But right, this is why we need each other, right? Find people in your life that want to spend time with you or around you. Look for people that you know that you have a way that you could help them, and invite them to dinner or to coffee or to a burrito, as Noah said last week, you know? Making disciples is not about getting people saved. It's a part of the process. But the whole process is teaching them to obey everything that you have been commanded. This is your full-time job as a Christian. Right? You may have another full-time job that God uses to provide for you monetarily, but your full-time task has been given by God. As we talked about on Easter, Jesus entrusted us to spread this movement of his kingdom, of hope, and his kingdom coming into earth and changing things for people. And he's continuing to do it the same way that he started. He found 12 people who were dedicated to spending their life with him, and then he taught them, and then he released them. Jesus had no plan B, right? Most people would have done it differently. If I wanted the whole world to know and I was God, I probably would have just invented a bunch of like giant floating televisions, you know, right? And just placed them all over, projected into the clouds at night. Like, this is what Jesus has done for you. You know, like, I feel like people would believe that. You know, that's a pretty big thing. Or maybe, you know, he's got all these angels. Like, they could just go to door to door and drop off little packets, you know, like little informational things. Have you heard about Jesus? You know, they could call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses. But seriously, like, I would have to do it totally different, you know, than what his plan was. Jesus is a very trusting person of his own creation to say that these 12 guys and these other people that they've been ministering to and the people that we encountered will spread this message to the whole world that needs to know it. He literally says that you take it to the ends of the earth. And we are on the coattails of that, you know, 12 guys spreading this message, and they've handed it off, like passing the baton down generation to get to us to continue to spread this message. Jesus simply poured himself into his disciples, and we're called to do the same. Right? You're not only to get people into church. You've been commanded to teach them all that you've been commanded. This is discipleship. Getting someone to church is considered, again, a step, probably not even going to be the first step. But it's definitely not discipleship. Right? You need to teach each other what you know. Some of you may be feeling unqualified as I say this. And I bet each of you in this room knows more than someone else in this room. Because we have different gifts, we have different life experiences, we have different abilities, and we can all help each other. Some of you guys may not even known in our conversations in ways that you've discipled me and taught me something that you knew that has allowed me to adjust and change my life, to grow. Right? There are fathers here that didn't have a godly father, and they need to be taught. What does that look like? There are mothers here that feel the exact same way. We need each other. The world needs us as well. This is the whole idea of being spiritual travel guides and not travel agents, as we've been talking about. And some of you haven't, like, I don't know what that means. I haven't been here. Well, we're going to get there, okay? So if you were planning a vacation, you know, and you wanted to go whitewater rafting or something in the Grand Canyon, you know, you could call up a travel agent, and they're going to suggest a few different places. They probably know the prices. They could email you some brochures, or if you're in the office, they can hand you brochures. They may connect you to the right people for the information that you need, but then their role ends there. As soon as you walk out or you respond to their last email, it's all in your hands to figure out the rest of this trip. Now, a travel guide not only knows that same info, they're going to come help you choose, you know, the best river for this. They're going to show you how it all works. Like, they're going to hand you your gear. and strap you in so you're actually safe, and when you fall out, you're not going to drown, and they're going to make sure it's on correctly and it's tight and it's fitted. And then they're going to take you down the river. They're going to get in the boat with you, right? And they're going to guide you down that river, and they're going to tell you when to paddle and how to paddle and when to paddle. And when you fall out, they're going to pull you back into the boat, hopefully, That's why you pay them money, and but their end goal is to make sure you arrive safely at the end. Churches for years have been set up to be led by one or maybe a small group of spiritual travel guides, while everyone else acts as the agents, right? They bring in a new person to the church, and that person has questions. They suggest a couple places that person could go to find their answers. Maybe the pastor or a small group leader. Maybe you can just post it on the Facebook group or something, and somebody will reach out to them. I've done what I can do. I've given you their phone number, their email. My responsibility is done here. Right? And that's how the church seems to act and point people to these leaders. But we've all been called to be the guides. Right? I don't want any agents. We don't need them. Right? You are all guides. If you bring someone to church, you're still in the discipleship process after that. Your job doesn't end there. Have you taught them everything that you know? Right? And this is a never-ending process because you will continue to learn, hopefully, and continue to teach. And it just continues to pour out. Right? And so unlike being a white water rafting guide that you need to complete some courses, hopefully, and some safety type things, when you become a Christian, you automatically take on that role of, I want to be a guide for someone else. Right? You may feel unqualified, and first off, you may I don't really know much, but that just means that what you're teaching other people is going to be nice and small. That's kind of nice. But sign up for Instay. Join the Wednesday night Bible study. Start studying regularly on your own. Come regularly to church, and you will find yourself with a lot more that you can pour out onto other people and to teach people. I think a lot of you guys feel unqualified, but you're not. If you have a story of how Jesus brought you into, or you really got Jesus into your life and he encountered you, you have things to share. You have lessons that you've already learned and things that you've come through and things that other people need to hear. Honestly, most churchgoers, I think they've been, because of just being agents and not guides, are becoming kind of spiritual gluttons, right? Where they're hoarding all their knowledge. They're probably so full of stuff that they can't intake anything more because they're not pouring anything out. They're like full sponges, right? That just not useful for anything. And if you feel like you're not getting anything out of church anymore, or these messages and these teachings are not giving me what I need, it can be because of, really two things. First, maybe you're full. You haven't been pouring out anywhere, and so it's just not getting in because there's no room for it, right? And the other option is really that you probably don't have someone personally discipling you. Right? So you feel these messages aren't hitting you personally, but that's not, again, I'm not here to disciple all of you. I'm here to encourage you to be like Jesus. And so you should have someone discipling you. Because when you have that relationship, it is about that personal growth of your life. But in both those cases, it involves you stepping out and doing something about it. Life is about growth and making the efforts needed to grow. As I mentioned before, discipleship starts before someone gets saved. And some of you are like, that doesn't make sense. So we're going to go there in a moment. But it starts at that witnessing, what Noah talked about last week. That's really where the process begins. When you're at work talking to an unsaved coworker who's struggling with something and you're giving them godly advice, you're discipling them. When you offer to take them to coffee and chat with them and pray with them, that's discipleship. You're already discipling people probably that you didn't even really know. You're just not being very intentional with it. Discipleship doesn't start at salvation. It starts with building relationships. So think of a timeline type of thing where you got 0 through 10 in dashes, and this is how they used to kind of explain discipleship process for a long time, that 0 was unsaved, 1 was the first step of salvation, and 10 would be somebody who's looking the best that they can like Jesus, and discipleship is helping somebody walk from 0 to 10. And for a long time, it worked well in our world because the jump from 0 to 1 was pretty easy for people because our nation was fairly culturally Christian. So people were very comfortable with church and the idea of God. They may not have accepted into believing it, but they knew a lot about it. So 0 to 1 made a lot of sense for that step. But our world is shifting and changing a little bit. And in this timeline of discipleship, it really goes from like 10 to like 0 to negative 10. Right? And because not only do you have people that aren't saved, they may know nothing about God. And so maybe they're sitting at negative 5, because they just know nothing about the church. They haven't really heard anything, and they're sitting there. And when you help that person go from negative 5 to 0, negative 5 to 3, negative 3, they're not even saved yet, you're still discipling them because you're working them through that process. All of a sudden, maybe they're like, I didn't think I could ever believe in God, but maybe I do a little bit now. Like, maybe I could do that. Like that, you've discipled someone, right? And we got people who say at negative 10, those are the people that were hurt by the church or have like just anger against the church. And you may take someone from a negative 10 to a negative 8 where they go, for a Christian, you're not so bad. Now you've moved them from being totally against it to, well, at least they're not against you. And that is still discipleship. Again, discipleship doesn't start at salvation. It starts with you building relationships. As we talked about last week, Noah talked about this. The first steps of discipleship is the same as the first steps of being a witness is learning people's names and them learning your name. That you can't build a relationship if you don't know who each other are. The next thing is hear their story. Make that time to go, man, what's going on in your life? How'd you get here? How'd you end up in Des Moines? How'd you end up at this job? And you hear their stories, and that gives you the opportunity for them to ask of you, what's your story? And then you're able to share, well, this is my story, but the bigger part of my story is this guy, Jesus, who kind of changed everything for me. As a spiritual travel guide, you are guiding them even before they believe. I know it's hard for me to do something in my life when I don't know what the end goal is. If you've ever asked me to help with something, one of my first questions is, okay, so what's the end goal here? Because I'm like, I want to know what I'm striving for, leading towards. And I don't know if anyone else is like that, but the end goal of discipleship is to look more like Jesus, right? It's for you and for the person you're discipling to look more like Jesus. Jesus taught his disciples to imitate him. Jesus, after serving his disciples by washing their feet in John 13:15 said, I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. And just a bit further down, chapter 13, verse 34, Jesus says, so now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Jesus' followers often wrote about this as well. In Ephesians 5, 1-2, Paul says, imitate God. Therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children, live a life filled with love, following the example of Christ. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God. In 1 Peter 2:21, Peter says, for God called you to do good, even if it means suffering, just as Christ suffered for you. He is your example, and you must follow in his steps. 1 John 2:6, as John says, whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. And many others called out very specific actions. They said, love like Jesus loved, forgive as Jesus forgave. Right? Be perfect as God is perfect. Be merciful as God is merciful. To be like Jesus is the goal. Right? And you won't get there without discipling people in your own life and being discipled. If you want to go deeper on the topic of what does it look like to be like Jesus, a couple months ago we talked about our core values, and you can check out the sermon called Christ-like and see more what does that look like for our end goal. But there were 4 phases of discipleship, and we use these when we were talking about how do you shape your life to be more like Jesus? Well, they transfer over to discipleship as well. And the first is see Jesus. Then it's to know Jesus, then be Jesus, and then show Jesus. See, the disciples, for the first part of their discipleship and following Jesus around, they actually didn't even believe Jesus was who he was fully. Right? Isn't that a little crazy? Right? And Jesus didn't care. It wasn't like he kept going, guys, you have to believe in me. Right? This is how it works. You have to believe in me. He's like, come follow me. I don't care where you're at right now. Let's just hang out. Let's do things. And so they were literally hanging out at a wedding in John 2. There was no reason for them to be there other than they were guests at a wedding. And they were probably just having a good time. They probably drank some wine and chilling because they ran out of wine at this wedding, and I'm sure that they had a part in it. And And you know, Jesus' mom goes to Jesus and he's like, hey, they're out of wine. And he's like, I don't understand how that's my problem. And he calls his mom woman. I don't advise that. But he does a miracle. And he fills up these jars of water. And then when he takes it in, it's now wine. And it's the best wine that these people have ever tasted. And in John 2, verse 11, it says, this miraculous sign at Cana in Galilee was the first time Jesus revealed his glory and his disciples believed in him. That people need to see Jesus in you. And it may not happen fully at the first time that you're there. Jesus couldn't even get people to see Jesus right away, okay? So don't expect it to happen differently for you, right? Invite people into your life. Be with them. Hang out with them. As long as they're not leading you away and you're leading them towards Jesus, then that is a relationship you should be having. This is both for you and for the people you're discipling. As a discipler, as the spiritual travel guide, it's your job to show people Jesus. Right? It's why it's one of our core values here, because that's where it starts. We have to show people Jesus. Right? They won't believe in Jesus until they see Jesus in you. Everyone also needs to have a spiritual travel guide. Someone who is discipling you. Someone who is showing you Jesus in a different way, in a deeper way. Right? You need someone to be your travel guide in life. Right? I meet with someone every other week who disciples me. He shows me Kevin Starkey, who spoke at our adult retreat getaway thing. That's the guy I meet with every other week, and he's the guy who's showing me Jesus in my life when I need it. And you know, he's the guy who answers my questions, who helps keep me encouraged, who talks through life with me, who calls me out where I mess up, which is sometimes why I don't want to meet with him. You know, but I know it's what I need. When I get a little bit off path and a little bit misdirected, he's like, you know, Andrew, I feel like there's something going on in your life. Should we talk about that? And I'm usually like, I think we're fine, you know? What's going on in your life? You know, and he is nice to me, and so he talks a little bit and then mixes in some story that he's like, I kind of think this is probably what you're going through. And then all of a sudden I'm crying, and then some friend I haven't seen in a long time shows up at the table, and it's uncomfortable. But you need that in your life. You need that person who's going to call you out and knows you personally and deeply, and their goal is for you to become more like Jesus, right? And that's it. That's their hopes for you. And they know you and can pour you in, and they're going to cheer you on, and they're going to encourage you. Your disciples should see Jesus through you in those same ways, which leads to the next phase of knowing Jesus. In Mark 4:10, it says, later when Jesus was alone with the 12 disciples and with the others who gathered around, they asked him what these parables meant. Right? One of the things that we see often in the Gospels from Jesus' disciples is they ask questions of Jesus a lot. We just talked about on Wednesday night that he was like, are you guys so dull? You still don't understand it? You know, so I mean, he gets frustrated all the same, and that's happened to me. But they just wanted to know him and understand him. In your discipleship, you should be searching to understand more of Jesus. And those who you are guiding should be learning more about who Jesus is by the way you live, and also through asking you questions and having those tough conversations. And hopefully, at times, you're stumped by those questions that cause you to look deeper, that cause you to grow, that cause you to have that conversation with your spiritual travel guide. If you continue to look through the Gospels, you'll see that Jesus rarely used like lecture-type teachings. Right? Instead, you will find that many times they were just eating together, they were ministering together, they were traveling together. And when Jesus would ask them questions, they would ask him questions, and he would use illustrations of the things around him, whether the temple and trees and plants and, you know, the fields and just all the things that were around him to help teach, because they were in a part of his life, like a major part of it. And you should be inviting these people into your life so that they're learning about Jesus just by the life you are living, and that they should see you doing things in your life that they go, why do we do that as Christians? And you say, well, you know, because I was reading this part, and this story happened to me a couple years ago. And I felt like this is something that God needs me to do and wants me to do. And they're like, wow, yeah. But can I do that too? And you're like, yeah, of course. And, you know, and that leads us to the next phase of to be Jesus. Right? These phases kind of overlap in ways because you're being discipled and you're discipling other people. But when you're being Jesus, to show Jesus to other people, But as a guide, the discipler, you want to start seeing your disciples start to be like Jesus, not just seeing Jesus in you, that they start to try and live that way. And you encourage them to do so. You praise them when they start to do things like Jesus did, right? And you should be encouraging them in other ways. You should send them out to do it. You know, when you go somewhere to minister to someone, you have them take the lead. And you just support them, right? You give them courage to step out. Encourage. You literally put courage into them to be like Jesus in their lives. Jesus sent out his disciples. In Mark 6:6-7, it says, "Then Jesus went from village to village teaching the people. And he called his 12 disciples together and began sending them out 2 by 2, giving them authority to cast out evil spirits." Right? This wasn't the only account of them being sent. You'll find them being sent out in different ways in different places on their own. And you also find them out doing things on their own and not succeeding. In Mark 9:17-18, it says, "One of the men in the crowd spoke up and said, 'Teacher, I brought my son so that you could heal him. He is possessed by an evil spirit that won't let him talk. And whenever this spirit seizes him, it throws him violently to the ground. Then he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast out this evil spirit, but they couldn't do it.'" Right? The disciples were there. They tried to pray for this kid, do everything that they saw Jesus do, and it didn't work. But Jesus steps up, if you keep reading, and he heals the boy, and everything moves on. And verse 28 and 29, you see some discipling happen here. And it says, "Afterward, when Jesus was alone in the house with his disciples, they asked him, 'Why couldn't we cast out this evil spirit?'" Right? And then they were able to sit down, and Jesus replied, "This kind can only be cast out by prayer." Right? Jesus didn't get upset with them. He didn't shame them for not being able to do what he called them to do. He was like, "Yeah, great job for trying. But let's talk a little bit more why it didn't work for you." And as you're leading other people to be like Jesus, you're probably going to notice yourself being more like Jesus as this guide who is stepping back and sending and supporting and encouraging. Right? But then as you have your travel guide, they're going to give you moments to step up. They're going to give you moments to be Jesus in a way that you haven't before, and they're going to encourage you to do so and do it. When they ask you to pray, do it. When they ask questions of you, answer them the best that you can. And they invite you to go on something, for Jesus, do it. And that last phase then is showing Jesus. This is the result of being Jesus in the right places. As we were commanded to go to the ends of the earth, to every people group. Being Jesus in church and around other people being Jesus is great. It's encouraging to each other. But the world needs you to show them Jesus out there. Right? You need to go to those places nobody else is wanting to go to, and having, going to those, the dark places like the East Side. No, I'm just kidding. But I just said I lived on the East Side. I went to elementary school over there. Okay, it's got a nice spot in my heart. They just tore down my elementary school. I was pretty sad. Right, in Mark 16, verse 15, it says, "Then he told them, 'Go into all the world and preach the good news to everyone.'" Just as Jesus sent his disciples out to disciple the world, we are still called to do that. Right? The nice thing is that we get to stay in touch with our disciples wherever we go now because of technology and keep these relationships up. But eventually you have to send your disciples off. Eventually you're going to send them out, and they're going to go disciple people somewhere else. Maybe, hopefully, it'd be cool to stay in contact and in the same areas. But you have to send them out and trust that they're going to continue to be the Jesus that you showed them. I feel like when you look at that weight, you say, somebody is looking at me and wanting to know, learn to be like Jesus because of the way that I live, puts a little bit more weight on making sure that you're making the right decisions and choices. And I think that there's some good natural accountability that happens when you take on discipleship roles and guiding other people. And that is part of the reason that God set up this process, because it keeps us accountable to each other, to the person that's discipling you, to the person that you're discipling, to be like Jesus, and it causes us all to grow more. Imagine if every single person in our church was in that type of relationship and we were all out constantly showing Jesus in every way. This place would be overflowing with people. And, that's not even our goal. I just want to reach the city, and the lives and the people that were in there. This is kind of Jesus' end goal with discipleship, is that we're all travel guides who have travel guides and who are creating travel guides that create travel guides that create travel guides. You know, and so on and so forth, because that's how we'll reach people. It's beautiful. It's what God planned to spread his kingdom. He didn't want anything more than people having real relationships with each other. So I'm going to send out an email this week and get it in the Facebook group, and it's already in the Church Center app, but there's a link to sign up for discipleship. And in there you can choose whether you're looking for someone to disciple you or you want to disciple somebody, and you can check both, and that's totally okay. And we're going to try and connect people, but because we're right here, right now, if you are not like in a purposeful, intentional discipleship relationship where someone is discipling you, you feel like you have no travel guide and you would want one, would you raise your hand? Right? And keep your hands up for a second. Look around the room, okay? If you have your hand down, especially, let's say, hey, these people want a relationship that is going to help me to look more like Jesus. And this is where you step up. And afterwards, you go talk to them and make that connection and schedule a time this week that you're going to go grab coffee or a burrito or coffee burrito. And, no, didn't sound good. And make that relationship. And if you're on Facebook, you can just comment it right there and just say, hey, I'm looking for someone. Okay, Simon says put your hands down. But even if okay, let's do the other side. Maybe you're like, I want to be a travel guide to somebody and I don't have anybody. Would you raise your hand? I want to help lead someone to be like Jesus. All right? And so now if you're the person that was like, I want to be discipled, go to those people with their hands up afterwards, so that you can make that connection. This is your responsibility, right? We are going to offer a tool through signing up online to try and help connect people, but in the end of time, God is not going to be upset that I didn't connect you with people. God is going to be frustrated that you didn't fulfill what he called you to do, okay? And so make those connections, right? Be purposeful in them. Like I said, I meet every other week with Kevin, but Kevin is the worst person at remembering things in general. And he'll admit that to himself. And so I literally text him the night before every other week and say, hey, man, we're still on for coffee tomorrow, right? And we get coffee. But if I don't, there's a good chance I'll just show up there and he won't be there. But I know I need that in my life. So I take that responsibility that I need to make this connection so that I can have that. So take the responsibility into your hands and do something about it. All right, let's pray. God, I'm just blown away that you decided that out of all of the options that you had in this world to spread your news and talk about your kingdom, that you chose us. That you chose us as kind of people full of faults and issues and all sorts of things, God, that you're like, hey, I believe in you. And you laid out this plan for us, Lord. And I just pray that we would step into that today, God, that we would get past our own feelings of inadequacy and being unqualified, and that we would just say, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to do these things. You believe in me. I know that Holy Spirit is guiding me. The promise at the end of the Great Commission is that, and I will be with you always to the very ends of the earth. And I know that you're going to be with me in my discipleship. That I'm not even discipling alone these people, that you're right there with me. And that when I'm being discipled, you're still right there with me and you're helping me. God, I pray that we would be so much more intentional with this in our church, in our lives. God, that we would take up those opportunities to get people into our lives and invite them into our homes and invite them into the things we're doing and invite them when they're in need and try and fill those needs for them and give that opportunity to hear each other's stories. Help us to be Jesus, to know more of him, to show more of him, so that the world around us can know you. In your name we pray. Amen. Before you go, let's play a game of Jesus Says, right? And Jesus says, go and make disciples and teach them what you know. All right? Here's, have a good day.